Today, we're talking to Jason Sobel, CTO at the New York Times, about how they're harnessing the power of modern tech to bring you the news. Thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode. For simple cloud and powerful AI that's built to scale, visit DigitalOcean.com or just click the link in the show notes. You're listening to Joel Beasley, Modern CTO.
When I saw the opportunity come up to interview CTO of New York Times, I was like, absolutely, I would love to meet this guy, Jason. Can you tell me a little bit about what it's like being the CTO at the New York Times?
Yeah, it's been incredibly fun and challenging, a learning experience. I think, the organization really lives and breathes on its reporting first and foremost. The news is the most important thing we do. But these days, technology is how we deliver it. We still have a subscription home delivery business that's doing well for us. But our digital business is our biggest business. It's growing. We know that eventually one day, the print business will go away. We don't know when that is. We hope not for a long time. But how we deliver the news, sports, games, product recommendations, cooking, all the great stuff we do is through technology. And so I get to work with my teams to think about how we do that in the best way possible. So we think a lot about just how do we build great digital experiences to deliver all this to our customers, and then what are all the really important technical underpinnings that we have to get right so we can continue to thrive and compete in just a really tough market.
That would make sense to me that the physical would decline and the digital would do well.
Yeah,
I think it's the generational thing too, right? So you've probably got 20, 30 years of still offering the maybe even longer than that, because we still have horse farms today. Even though we've got cars, we still have. So there'll still be a desire for it at some point,
Yeah, we hope the print business lasts a long time. I think when I was interviewing, I met our publisher, A.G. Sulzberger, and he said something that really resonated with me, that a given story, more often than not, is better in a digital experience, that you can do just all these new and creative things in a website or in an app that you can't do on the printed page, but that there's nothing like the packaging of the printed paper, that it is still the best way to package up all the news we do. And that idea of, when it was all we had, we would just sort of sit at home and leaf through the paper, and the sort of the serendipity that it created, the physical space it had, was really valuable. And as things have sort of gotten more and more compressed into mobile, that the overall packaging is not quite as satisfying as that physical experience. And I think that really resonates. There's so much we can do in a story with technology, and our newsroom does what we call interactives, just these incredibly rich stories that really take advantage of technology in a compelling way. But there is something when you're only seeing one or two headlines on your phone that is very different than having that physical paper.
Yeah, I like the physical stuff and the digital stuff. So what I do is I audible almost everything that I want to read.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know if you can see it, but then I buy, it's down there. I buy the physical books that are the best books.
Yeah.
And I don't even ever usually read them. I usually just buy them and put them on my bookshelf, because when I see the spine, I remember the principles in the book. And to me, that's the cue I need.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is nice kind of having both. And it's funny you talk about audio. That's been a huge focus for us recently, is really just trying to make all of our great content available in as many different mediums as possible. And with the way technology has been advancing, we're able to do a lot more what we call automated voice. So we still have a lot of human-read stories that we produce, but we've been able to use tech to make much more of our report available now through audio means as well. So for folks who want to listen to the New York Times, you can do that now too.
I love that, Jason. We've been tracking actually here at the podcast. We started about 2 years ago tracking automated podcast, because it's, in our space, we're technology people. Boy, has it come really far in 2 years. It went from janky, I don't know, it's not that.
Yeah.
It's a cute little idea, to Oh, wow. You can't tell the difference. It's gotten really good.
It's remarkable. It is just remarkable how much the sort of this new wave of kind of Gen AI driven tech has. I mean, multimodal is so powerful now, and we're starting to see it with video as well. But yeah, for us, it's been a real boon in our ability to just make the report a lot more accessible to people by, taking stories and sort of packaging them up in different ways that are going to get them to the biggest possible audience.
That's so cool. You guys have a bunch of podcasts over there at New York Times?
We do, yeah. We have some incredible podcasts that are going really well for us. Hard Fork for the tech team is a good one. Ezra Klein's podcast. We have, it's interesting too how just all these mediums are blending, right? Like what we used to think of as a podcast, now a lot of people consume them more on, YouTube or on other video platforms than they even might in just like a podcast app or something like that. So we see a ton of people watching. Ross Douthat has a great show that's going really well for us called Interesting Times. So yeah, there's just been a real successful expansion of those formats for us.
Have you been on Hard Fork?
I have not.
The CTO hasn't been on Hard Fork?
I don't know if there would be a conflict there or not. That's an interesting question. I have taken every opportunity I can to pitch myself as a new podcast host for the New York Times. So maybe someday. I was considering a theater major alongside. I ended up majoring in computer science, but I always loved performing as a kid, and so my end game is still to worm my way onto stage or TV somehow if I can.
Oh, that's awesome! I love it. I'm a split person too. I go out and I tour as a comedian, and then I do I did engineering, like full-time software engineering for 17 years. And then the podcast got popular. That became my full-time thing. And I stopped doing the hands-on software every day. And I had this extra time. And I was like, what do I do? And I was like, let's go out and make people laugh.
I love it. You're going to have to do some of your bets for me.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do right now. No audience.
Let's just do them and analyze. One-on-one stand-up is a tough sell, I imagine.
That is, there's very few things that you need for stand-up to work, but the few things is an audience and a dark room and a microphone. Yeah. So,
all right. Well, that's I'll have to put that on my list too. Give stand-up a try sometime.
Where are you located at?
I live in the Bay Area, actually. So I have been out here since 2004. I grew up on the East Coast in Connecticut. Came out here after college, where all the tech jobs were. So it was the early 2000s. And then I got the reach out from the New York Times during COVID, and everyone was more remote. And so I've been working remote. I go back to New York about once a month. But around half of our engineers also work outside the New York area. So for me, being remote has been a little more manageable.
And so what were you doing in the Bay Area before the New York Times stuff came up?
Yeah, so I came out here. Actually, I focused a lot on computer graphics in college. And so I came out here. My first job in the Bay Area was working for Industrial Light and Magic, which is the Lucas special effects company up in Marin County. And I was only there for a few months before I decided to make a change and work with a bunch of friends over at a company called NetApp. And that was sort of my first real professional software job. So I did that for a few years, working on, file systems in these this was pre-SaaS, and it was these huge honking servers, pre-cloud. We'd put them behind companies' firewalls. And so it was a very interesting experience, real old school enterprise, waterfall release cycles. The cost of a bug was really high. I remember I shipped a bug once that we had to patch, and going through that experience was a little traumatic. Made me not want to ship bugs ever again. And then in 2007, I started thinking about trying to do something a little different. And I had a friend who'd gone to Google and some friends over at Facebook, and interviewed with Facebook, and was just blown away by the people there and the ambition. I hadn't used the product a ton, so I had kind of missed it in college by just a couple of years. But I knew a lot of people a little younger than me who were just obsessed with the product. And I could see why when I went inside the walls and got to meet a lot of people. And Yeah, was lucky enough to get an offer there and joined. We had about 20 million monthly active users when I joined, which seemed massive to me coming from an enterprise company. And it was just like right place, right time, and got to really grow in my career there. That's where I ultimately switched over into engineering management. Did that for a while, and then had another startup job here. So I tried something much smaller after about 6 years at Facebook. Was the VP of engineering at a startup called Quantifind for a couple of years. And then right before the Times, I was at Airbnb for about 5 years, working in a couple of different roles there.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So what created this transition from Airbnb? So you went from Airbnb to New York Times.
Yeah, that's right.
Were you just like, did you feel that you had contributed all that you could contribute to that project at that time, and or how did that go?
Yeah. So, I'd been there for about 5 years, and most of that time was working in the trust and safety space at Airbnb, which was not something I'd done before, and was an incredible learning experience because they're really hard, important problems for Airbnb, just keeping the community safe. We got to learn a lot of new technology, but also just learn a lot that really wasn't about tech. I worked with a number of people who were what we called our operations teams. So these were the people sort of on the front lines of keeping the community safe, interacting with customers if they needed any help or had any issues, and really got a lot out of that experience. But then we had a new CTO join, and when he came in, I switched over to work with him on our core infrastructure. So that was more what I'd sort of grown up doing at NetApp and at Facebook. And so I spent some time doing that and kind of helping get the team to a good place. And so it was the end of 2020, and we were all working remotely. We were all still kind of on distance because of COVID. And yeah, I felt like I'd kind of done a lot of what I wanted to do there, and I wasn't really sure where to go next. So I actually took some time off and had a few months to just meet a lot of people and explore. And when the New York Times reached out, what just really grabbed me was just how connected I was to the mission. I think working at Airbnb was great, and I love the product we built. But journalism has really suffered in the digital era. And as someone who really believes in the value of journalism, but also worked at Facebook and was part of the shift of advertising dollars from traditional media to digital media, I felt really connected to the idea of helping journalism thrive in this new era and being able to use technology to do it. So that really was what pulled me in.
I'm curious, I don't know much about journalism, but what I would think, you mentioned you were connected to the mission and journalism was suffering. When I look at from just my software engineering standpoint, I'm like, isn't it thriving? Don't we have the most amount of people able to do this? Didn't it enable, or can you explain to me how journalism is suffering?
Yeah. I'm definitely not an expert, so I'll probably get some of these details wrong, but I think it's about 70% of journalism jobs have disappeared over the last 25 years. So basically what happened is, if you were a big advertiser, TV and print media were your channels. That was how you could reach the most people. And so a lot of advertising dollars were going to those places. And, the New York Times was one of the biggest papers and benefiting really well from those ad dollars. As Facebook and Google came online, Google first and then Facebook, and then more and more digital properties, they just hoovered over a huge portion of those ad dollars. And so it was sort of this just negative feedback loop where the money would move and also people's attention would move. So there were less people consuming more traditional media, whether it was TV or printed media. And so it was just this feedback cycle of more and more budget moving over to digital mechanisms. And so most people in America don't have a local paper anymore. When I grew up in Connecticut, we would get 3 papers. So my dad was a Wall Street Journal reader, but then we'd also get the Hartford Courant for Connecticut. And then we had a local paper, I think the Journal Inquirer, I think it was called, that was just for our local area. And these days, basically, there's no, there'll be maybe small local papers in a few areas, but that's very rare. And in many states, even the state paper has either gone out of business or is really a shell of itself. and is only able to have a very small newsroom. And so there's been like a real challenge in the journalism industry as a result. And there's actually been a bunch of studies that show local and statewide corruption has increased alongside the decrease in sort of local and statewide journalism, because you don't have those people poking around and sort of asking the hard questions that they were asking when I was younger.
All right. You've convinced me. Okay. But I mean, no, you're right. What happened was the stuff came out and that was like sugar, it was like candy. And then like everybody piled onto that, and it lacks nutrition, but it tastes really good. And then if all the eyeballs are going over there, then traditional media, I'm not going to say you guys specifically, I'm just going to group everyone as like traditional media is like half the people in traditional media are like, let's play catch up and let's do more sugar. And that's where the money is. And then it just becomes such a small sliver of where the money is for truth and like real in-depth journalism that it kind of almost goes into this little niche category, whereas it was once the main category.
Yeah, I do think in general, news consumption, I think, is just at a different scale than it was previously. And, people will say they get their news from different places. So a lot of people say they get their news from Google or from TikTok or other places like that. I think there's a different level of rigor that's put into a TikTok creator's news than our newsroom. Our newsroom is pretty incredible. I know how hard they work, the standards they live by. We preach this value of independence with the idea that we just follow the truth where it leads. That's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to tell a story. Our opinion pages are different, but our news is about, let's follow the facts and let's tell the story that we find when we follow those facts. And I think, most sort of traditional media or news outlets would take that same approach. That's harder and harder to find, especially in an era where there's a lot of activism, and activism is a worthy cause in many cases, but activists want you to say things in their voice and through their lens and with what outcome they're trying to drive. We view our job as something fundamentally different, which is just telling the truth.
Well, I think you guys will do well because you have a brand. It's definitely an old brand that people have come to trust to get their news from, and it's interesting for me as someone who doesn't have a dog in the fight to kind of watch how this is going, where like independent creators pop up, but then sometimes that's always been the case where you will read the New York Times because you like a specific writer who has a specific column, right? That's always been the case, but they originally were only available through the New York Times. And now some of these people are just going out independent.
That's right.
And so it's like, how do you still need that, because the breeding ground for developing these individuals and their craft is at places like the New York Times, right? That's where they can get really good. And it's really, really, really hard as an independent creator to start with nothing.
That's right.
Most of the successful independent creators that we would apply that label to, they came out of a major news organization. That's where they got their first 10 or 100,000 followers.
Yeah. And I think that's right. And I don't want to paint sort of digital media or the digital ecosystem as all bad, right? I think it had this bad effect on journalism. There were a lot of great things that came with it, and there's a lot of debate to be had about echo chambers and what's working and what isn't working in media. But it has given voice to a lot more people. The old model where it was the newscasters on TV and in journalism, and those were the only people who could talk at scale, that had challenges too. So I think we're really just trying to figure out, how do we make this transition and hopefully just have as much news and thoughtful commentary as possible. I think we don't have as much independent journalism as I think we should have. And we're excited that the Times can continue that. And hopefully more people can learn from what we've done, because that is just a necessary thing for society. Like, we really believe that you need an independent media asking questions and digging into things and telling stories that need to be heard.
No, I'm in alignment with you on that. I like by the way, talking to you and watching your career trajectory, you really are, I think, in the right spot for you right now. Like, you really do, like, it comes out and everything you say, like, you really do care about what they're doing there at New York Times.
I do. I think that's so important. Not everyone has that privilege, but to be able to align your career with things you really believe in and are excited about, it's pretty special when you can get that dialed in.
Real quick, before we continue, I wanted to give a special shout out to DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode. DigitalOcean is cloud infrastructure that's simple to spin up, complete with integrated AI dev tools, plus 99.99% uptime SLAs and industry-leading pricing on bandwidth. We all know DigitalOcean. It's super reliable, it's been around forever, and now with DigitalOcean's Gradient platform, developers can train, fine-tune, deploy, and scale AI workloads all in one place. DigitalOcean is reliable and affordable at any budget. Companies can save up to 30% on their cloud bill when they come to DigitalOcean. Use code DO25 and get $200 in free credits to get started. Simple cloud, powerful AI, built to scale. That's DigitalOcean.
Now, back to the episode.
Let's talk about the first time that you went into management. Did you just get an offer to go into management? Did you turn something down? How did that go?
Yeah. It's funny. I was actually, I was at Facebook. I'd been there less than a year, and the team was just growing super quickly. So when I joined, I think we had about 60 or 70 engineers, and we were like tripling or, doubling every year for the first 2 or 3 years. It was growing so fast as the product was taking off. And my manager at the time, this guy, Bobby, I think he'd gone from like 10 or 15 reports to 30. And he was still managing everything that we called infrastructure, which was kind of all the back-end tech keeping things up. So managing databases, servers, caching, right? We were this big LAMP stack. And this was pre-cloud, and sort of the open source community hadn't really taken off. I mean, obviously we're using Linux and Apache, Memcache, MySQL, and PHP. Those were like our core things. So anyway, he had, like 30 reports, and he was feeling he needed another manager. He needed someone to help manage more people. And I had just taken on a big project to open our second big data center. So we had all of our kind of servers on the West Coast between San Francisco and Santa Clara, and just one copy of the databases. So we ran a sharded MySQL backend, and we were running out of capacity. And our plan to scale the capacity was to open up a data center in Virginia. And we weren't going to just have web and cache there, we were also going to have a second copy of all the databases. And so we had to figure out how to make that work. And that was the project I got when I joined. So I joined in April, I think. And I was told that if we hadn't figured this out by the end of the year, we would run out of capacity and Facebook would go down. So had a tight timeline to figure it out. So I remember I was at Thanksgiving, like launching the data center at the Thanksgiving table, and it mostly worked. So anyway, I just come off that project, and it like spanned the whole company, had to pull a lot of people together, work with a lot of teams and our ops group and software engineers and everything. And so, I guess he thought because I could handle that I might be good as a manager. And he took me out to lunch. We got sushi, and he asked me if I was interested. And I actually said no. I was like, I don't know what managers do. I don't want that job. So I turned him down. He had to take a couple runs at me to get me into it.
What ultimately caused you to change your mind?
I figured it wasn't a one-way door. You
can say money too, by the way.
It wasn't money. No, there was no new money.
No?
That's actually one thing that I've liked about the places I've been is we haven't viewed management as a promotion. We've used it as a different job that has the opportunity for sort of equal impact, just in different ways. So there's only one CTO at the Times. There's not an equivalent like IC engineer level, but for every other level at the Times, at Facebook, at Airbnb, there was an equivalent engineer. So you could be a software engineer and have just as much opportunity for compensation and impact as a manager, which I think is actually a really good thing to do. He thought I would be good at it. He talked me through why he thought it was a really valuable job in just helping people do their best work. And like I said, I didn't think it would be a one-way door. So if I hated it, I could always bail out and go back to writing code. But I ended up loving it. And I think honestly, I was a good engineer. I've worked with a ton of engineers who are better than me. I think as a manager, I've probably gotten further than I would have as a coder.
I would agree with myself too. Sorry. For me, I'm thinking right now,
I think you would have been a crappy coder.
I think you would have. Yeah. I looked at your GitHub before the episode and I agree with that fully.
Yeah.
No, it's like, I felt like I completely grasped the concept. I built and deployed full applications that were, but at the same time, the people that I've gotten to work with once the project started having money and like growing, I'm just like, oh, there's just like a whole other breed. There's a whole other level that I'm not even, and maybe my communication gift is something that they don't have in that way. And so I can maybe make some more impact by building and growing teams. And that's ultimately, I found that the reward I get from like a successful deployment, if that's the only thing it's 100%, it's max greatness. But for me, if I grow a team and watch pivotal moments in their life change, whether it's having kids or personal growth or whatever it is, that is 100x a deployment for me. So I'm like, look, that is just so much more rewarding on my time invested. And I didn't control that. I just kind of experienced both and I had to choose.
Yeah. Yeah, that really resonates. I think that satisfaction I get from feeling like I've helped a team or a person do something that they might not have done otherwise. It's always hard to take credit as a manager. Like, how much was it you, when at the end of the day, it's other people driving the majority of the outcome. So that's always tough. But I think there's a number of things I can look at and say, I can really see how I helped get this to a place it maybe wouldn't have gotten to without me. That's always been hugely validating. And then there's a few people who I stay in touch with from previous jobs who just found working with me useful and my opinion valuable. And so the fact that they still want to talk to me even after they don't report to me anymore and I don't control their comp or their career or anything, that's always been really validating as well.
Somebody, I can't remember where I picked this up, a book or a guest or something, but they explained it like you're a gardener. Like you can't force the plant to grow, but you can control certain things in the garden and get the weeds out and make sure that there's nutrients in the soil. Like you can do certain things, but you can't force it.
That's right.
And so that's how I started looking at it a few years ago. I was like, all right, I just need a good garden. I can't control it, but I can control these certain inputs, and so I'll focus on those.
Yeah, I love that metaphor. I might borrow that. Yeah.
Take it. I took it from somebody.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
I know. And okay, let's talk about, we've got to talk a little bit about GenAI. I know it's like
let's do it
in every episode, but I mean, are you guys do you have a model running wild just making the news up over there? Like what
we do not.
What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing with generative AI?
Yeah, that is definitely not on the menu. So I think that's, right out of the gate, that's probably the most important thing to say is, all the news is written by humans, edited by humans. A ton of editorial oversight goes into anything that's going to make it into the New York Times. What we are thinking about is a bunch of different things. So one, how can we use this tech to make the production of the news easier and more efficient? So there's definitely things we can build to help out our newsroom. So, one example is we built some tools to go through a bunch of video of the president and try to document. So actually a concrete example was one of our engineers went through hours and hours of video of Donald Trump to try to identify changes in his patterns that might map to cognitive decline. And that's tech that would have been, much harder to build 2-3 years ago. And now we were able to put together to assist our journalists to help identify segments for them to look at. So it wasn't giving them the answer. It was just saying, hey, we're going to go through hundreds of thousands of hours of video and identify segments you should watch over the years to kind of try to map out how things might be changing with the president. We also have built it into some of our products. So if you're a New York Times cooking user, which I desperately want to be, but still never make the time to cook, we now use GenAI to help with converting from like imperial to metric units or to help scale up or down a recipe. A lot of people think that's just a math formula, but it's actually not. There is a fair amount of sort of subjectivity and creativity that goes into unit conversion or scaling up or down a recipe. GenAI is able to help with that. I talked about how we're using it to do more what we call automated voice, so we can get the news in different formats. And then probably the thing that I'm thinking the most about is just how our software engineers are going to use this tech to be better at their jobs. That's just something like every engineering leader is thinking about these days.
Have you come up with any good, do you just mandate you guys have to use Copilot? Like, how do you actually roll that out with your teams?
Yeah, we've stayed away from mandates. My view is engineers are going to use tools that make them better, right? I don't think there's anyone sitting around today that's, resisting a compiler. Although I'm sure when they first came out,
you'd be surprised. There's one.
I think you have to kind of push people and encourage them, and maybe we will get to some point where it has to be a mandate. But I think in general, people are going to use tools that make them better at their jobs, and it's still. But
are they? Like, do you track adoption there? How do you?
We do.
That?
We are tracking adoption, and we found we're not at 100% weekly use, but we're getting close. So we're finding that. So the main tools we're using, so GitHub Copilot, Cursor, and then we're just starting with a lot more Claude Code. So, and Claude Code is something I'm really excited about for the future. So we are seeing weekly usage of those tools. We want to start trying to have more fine-grained metrics to try to understand, are these things paying off? I think that's really hard, but that's something we're thinking a lot about now. This year's approach was basically throw these tools out there and see what engineers do with them, and where does it work, where doesn't it work, and we're willing to accept some creative waste, right? So when you're trying to figure out how to use something new, you're not going to get it perfectly right out of the gate, and so we wanted to give our teams the time and space to figure it out for themselves. What problems was it really helpful with? What problems was it less helpful for? Now that we're at the end of the year, we've tried to synthesize a lot of the learnings, and we're hoping to put together some real conviction about how we do this next year. That's a conversation I'm in the middle of right now with my team. Probably what we're going to lean into is this idea of how do we have more and more engineers thinking about themselves as orchestrating the work of AI agents? How do they use these things to do the job in a different way? We've seen some really impressive results with people who've done that. That's not going to be appropriate for every coding job that somebody has, but we think a bunch of them could benefit from that approach. And so that's what we're currently thinking our way through.
Well, I get to talk to a lot of different people about how they're doing this. And a lot of them are taking that approach. They're just giving it to them and saying, here's the guardrails under which you can use it, especially like if you're a healthcare type company, right?
Yeah.
And so they'll just say, here's the availability. And then they watch kind of what people are doing with them. And then they start highlighting people who are having success with them. So they'll have the lunch and learns. If this individual's having success, how are they doing it? That way you can... Like, if just given the tool, if I just give you a hammer, that's one thing, Jason. But like, if I give you the hammer, you play with it for a few minutes, and then I show you how to expertly use the hammer, you're like, oh, okay, that's how it works.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think that's just the mindset we've taken is we've brought in people from some other companies who have been a little bit further ahead. We've highlighted people internally who found really good uses of this. It's been really interesting for me talking to a lot of peers. This is something I've invested a lot of time in this year, is just picking people's brains on how they're doing it. Everyone loves to have these conversations right now. And we found that generally smaller companies have been able to get further ahead. So they bring this in from day one. They don't have a big legacy code base to deal with. And they're just like taking, 15 and 20 person teams and giving them these tools and just really empowering them. And they all feel like they're moving significantly faster than they would have, if they started the company 5-10 years ago. Bigger teams like ours, where you have a much bigger legacy code base, I think it has been more this, give everyone the hammer, see what they do with it, figure out what's going to make sense for your organization. I'm trying to figure out how to meet those two things, because I do think these smaller organizations have some learnings that apply to us. It's different when you need to take, potentially hundreds of people and change their workflow versus just your first 10 or 15 engineers. Excuse me. So that's a lot of what we're trying to navigate now.
Yeah, I did a couple interviews with a few. There was like 2 different startups, and maybe Josh, if you're there, you can remind me which one. But there was this one startup that came out of a big company, but they made essentially like a co-pilot or like an assistive coding tool that was specifically tuned for context for large code bases.
Interesting.
And because they were having this problem within this other company of like, we've got this massive code base, but like the GenAI tools aren't taking in enough context to actually help us with them efficiently. And they built this entire infrastructure and system out to just handle that. And then they went and started selling it to the big companies.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
So if Josh finds that, maybe I'll email it to you after.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Or something like that. But when I met them, I was like, that's fascinating.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, one of the interesting things we're trying right now is we have this old subscription system that's been in place, I think since the 90s was when it was written.
Oh, wow.
And so it's been like picked up and moved into the cloud and all kinds of madness, but it's kind of on an old legacy database. And the code, the database itself, like it's all kind of a rat's nest. It's really complicated. It's really scary to mess with it. And so we're actually working on a GenAI project to try to sort of lift and shift that onto like a more modern Postgres sort of stack. So that's in progress.
I love the elephant.
Yeah. So we're hoping we can pull that off over the next few months, which would be pretty cool.
I remember when I was picking out databases, the Postgres, I chose it because of its logo.
That's always a good reason. That's why we spend so much time on code names and logos, and it's all marketing. It's important.
It's funny. It's embarrassing. It's like picking your sports team from their uniform. It's
I know a lot of people who do that. Yeah.
People do it.
Yeah.
People do it. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about leadership insight and advice that you've gotten over your career. I'll give you some constraints and then we'll see what we can pull out. Okay. So I want a piece of advice, but here's the constraints for it. Somebody told you this, you implemented it, it worked, and you've kept it for a very long time. It's something that you like swear by now.
Yeah.
What piece of advice is that?
I don't remember exactly how this was delivered to me, but it's this idea that like clarity is kindness, you know? And I think it really resonated with me as an engineer because my native wiring is to just kind of say things as they are. And I think as you get into management or leadership, you can start to kind of doubt that approach. You can, well, maybe if I hedge or I try to say it this way, maybe they'll think this other thing, or I don't want to demotivate anyone. I don't want to, there's just so many excuses or reasons you could come up with to avoid having just a hard, honest conversation. And sometimes you should, right? You know, sometimes you should hedge, but I think it's relatively rare. The thing that I've found in my career that I've really stuck with is just say the hard thing directly. Don't try to hide it. Don't try to cushion it. You don't need to be a jerk, right? You can be empathetic and caring, but still be really honest with someone. And that at the end of the day, clarity and honesty are going to win out over trying to get clever or cute and say things in a certain way to try to avoid a bad outcome or soften the blow or something like that. That's really stuck with me.
I fully agree with that too, by the way. And I don't think it necessarily becomes easier, but I do believe with experience, you can reduce your time between identifying when the hard conversation needs to happen and having the hard conversation. Does that check
Absolutely.
out?
One of the things I say all the time is by the time you're thinking about whether or not you should have a hard conversation with someone, you're probably like a month or two too late. Because we just don't want to. It's human. Like, I don't want to have that hard conversation. I don't want to say that tough thing. It's going to suck. And so by the time you're thinking about it, you've probably known that you should do it. And at that point, it's just a matter of like, how do I get there? And what outcome do I want? And how do I do this as directly and respectfully as possible?
Absolutely. And it's almost always like the perspective that I took, whether it's right or not, I don't know. But I have found that like it's nice if you don't say it or if you try to sugarcoat it, but it's kind if you do say it directly. And also that it's useful to them. So if I have somebody who's underperforming and we're having that conversation, we have multiple conversations, and then it's time for them to go, that gives them an indicator of like how much effort they have to put in. Like if they lose the job, if the point comes to it where they actually like exit the organization, that gives them a new piece of data. It's saying that I performed this way and this was where the limit was. And that's important for them because when they go into, because I used to suck, Jason. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to say. I used to be not great. And then I wasn't getting good results. And I was like, this is a horrible existence. And I found out that like, I just have to put in a lot more effort. I just have to try a lot harder. And then I did. And I was like, oh, I don't suck. I just wasn't living up to what the standard in the workspace was, you know, to be this level of engineer, to be this level of business person. Yeah.
My version of that was at NetApp. I was like fresh out of college and thought I was, the greatest thing in the world. Unlike now when I know how garbage I am. And I was just not fun to work with. Like I was very critical and pleased with myself and, thought I had it all. And my manager at the time, he was so nice. He he gave me this feedback and I just blew up on him. I was like, what are you talking about? It's not my fault. They're idiots, like this and that and that. And it's so funny to look back on it and, think about it with the perspective I have now and what must it have been like for him. But it was absolutely the right feedback. And it's, something I've had to really work on my whole career is I can be prickly with people when I'm frustrated. And it started back then and I still have some elements of that today. And, you can't work on it if you don't hear about it.
Were your parents military at all?
No.
No?
No, I don't know where I got it from.
Just genetically.
Yeah.
Like my dad was military and an engineer. And so when I look back, I'm like, oh, that's why I'm so direct. There's we have to be direct. And then I found out that, there's also different cultures on the planet.
For sure.
I mean, and different cultures have different levels of directness. And so I found I get along very well with my Israeli friends because they are incredibly direct.
They sure are.
Yeah. I'm like, when I hang out with them, I'm like, I could be me. When I hang out with everyone else, I'm like, all right, I got this layer, coding layer of checking what comes out.
Speaking, layer. That's funny.
The output management layer.
Yeah, I don't know where it came. I mean, definitely my family, there was a fair amount of conflict when I was young. And so I think I got comfortable with that. And but it's funny, my wife, she and her brother were apparently perfect children and never got in trouble. And her parents confirmed this. And so now we have 3 kids who are not perfect children. And I find it a little easier to handle them because I was not a perfect child and I got in trouble and I got yelled at, whereas my wife never did. And so she's like, what do we do with these monsters? Anyway, so I take that point on where you came from. You just have such a different wiring about how to work with people and tone and conflict. And I think that's one of the things that as a manager, you have to figure out really quickly is for this person in front of me, how do I say something in the way that they're going to hear it? And the way it might make sense for me or the way I have it in my head might not be what's going to make sense to them. And so I think you kind of have to figure out each person and their language and their way of thinking so that you can help them get where they need to go.
I use Grok when I want to communicate something to my wife that I am sure. If I feel strongly about something, I'm like, okay, that's usually an indicator. I want to communicate this. I want to get this through, but I need to get through in her language. So I've told all my friends, in my personal life, dude, try using Grok or whatever AI you like. They all kind of work the same. And you can say, hey, I want to communicate this to my wife and here's what I want. And it'll give you tips on how to phrase it.
I like that.
AI is fantastic. Also, I have 3 kids, 8, 6, and 3. What age ranges are yours?
15, 13, 9. I have 2 boys and a girl. Yeah. So
Same.
a little ahead of you.
Yeah. I got 1 girl, girl's oldest, and then 2 boys.
We're the other way. Yeah, our boys are oldest and then our daughter's younger. It's wild seeing her with two older brothers. Like, I think she is a little more comfortable with certain types of humor and violence
Of course.
she might be otherwise.
Of course. Well, this was fantastic. Last question here for you. If you're going to hire someone, bring them onto your team specifically, not just at the New York Times. They're going to be your direct report. You're doing the interview with them. What's the one thing that you like really care about that every time you do an interview, you're like, I need to find out if this lines up? Yeah.
The thing I always say I'm looking for is relentless problem solvers. That's my go-to phrase. Like, I think, I don't know how specific this is to tech. It's all I've ever really worked in. It's probably useful anywhere, but that doesn't mean you always have the answer. It doesn't always mean you know exactly what to do, but you know how to figure it out. You know how to get through or around or over whatever wall's in front of you. You know how to get help. You know what you can do on your own, what you can't. Like, but just that idea that we're never sitting still. We're always trying to understand what are the most important problems right now, and are we set up to solve them? So that's my interview is all crafted around, can I get at that core? Is this person someone who's just gonna, if there's a problem that I give them, they're gonna knock it down, and then they're gonna figure out what the next problem is and knock that one down. And that's just their mindset, is they're hungry to find those opportunities and find their way through them.
It's almost like a personality trait, right? And you're trying to figure out if they have that one, because you can't like train it. I don't think you can train that. Like I'd always say, like, I can't make someone run, but I can find someone who's running and point them in the right direction. Yeah.
I think it's really, that question of like, what can be learned and taught, and what do you come in with? It's such an interesting one. I do find that, like, when you ask people about, the biggest problems they've solved, and like what's, one of my favorite questions is just, what's one of the biggest problems you identified? Like, no one told you to go work on it. Just like over the last couple of years, what's something you saw was really important for your organization or for your team, and you just got buy-in and you just made it go happen? And how did you solve that? That to me is always a good sign for somebody, if they're like identifying really important strategic things on their own and then getting people rallied around them and solving them. That to me is a good indicator of your ability to do this.
I love it. You also find this a lot in entrepreneurs.
Oh yeah.
Like,
yeah, man, that looks like a hard job. It's funny. People always ask me if I'll start a company someday, and I just always say no. Like, it just looks really, really hard. I mean, my job's hard enough as it is. Like, I don't need to make it 10 times harder.
No, it's the best way I've ever heard it described. I've built and sold 3 companies.
Oh, wow.
The best way I've ever heard it described is it's staring into the abyss and eating glass. And I was like, yeah.
And I'll do that 2 more times.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
but it's also very rewarding.
I'm sure. I'm sure when you get it right and like you've put that team together. Yeah, there is something really rewarding about bringing a group together around something you're really excited about. And you can do that inside another company, but I got to imagine it's at another level when it's just you from day one.
Yeah, it's wild. But but for me, it's almost like I have to, because I found, like, I tried, working other stuff, but I realized if I'm not doing something where the odds are stacked against me, that part of me isn't like clicking on to like get up and do stuff. Yeah. So if I wake up and I stare at a problem that's so big and so difficult and it's like such a long journey, to me, that's very exciting. For sure. If I wake up and it's just easy, routine, I'm like, well, okay.
Yeah. Totally. No, I mean, that's a lot how I think about my career is, if I can kind of see on the horizon that it's going to get easy, or there's not something I'm really excited about, then that's a good time to start thinking about, how do I change something up internally? Or, should I start thinking about something new? So like at Facebook, for example, I had 3 or 4 different jobs in 6 years because I just wanted to experience new things.
Yeah, but your ability to recognize that within yourself, first of all, that puts you at the next level. Mm-hmm. Then you even go to the next level by being able to act on that. So it's like first observing it. The second is to act on it. And then the third is to realize it's a pattern and keep doing it intentionally. Right. Yeah. And that's literally, I've done 1,000 interviews. And so I'm always trying to like figure out where everybody's at and like why some people are up here and some people like, what's the difference between the top, 10% and the top 1%. And it's really it's self-awareness has got to be one of the biggest ones, because that creates this energy that then is when the energy gets applied correctly, it just takes them right to the top.
Yeah. Well, I got to bring my wife in here. You can tell her how self-aware I am.
She's anything like my wife, it won't mean that much. She'll be like, tell the nerd to be quiet. Awesome. Jason, this is an absolute pleasure. I just made a new friend. Thank you for doing this, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was a blast.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you found this episode useful, please share it with a friend or a colleague who you think would get value from it. And if you have topics that you would like to hear discussed on the podcast, either add me on LinkedIn or send me an email, joel@moderncto.io. Every time I get an email or LinkedIn message, it absolutely makes my day and inspires me to keep going.